want to introduce myself. So this is me. In short, to avoid just reading this slide, I have 19 years of experience already. I have worked essentially 11 years in telecommunication companies. I have worked more or less 5 years in companies with software as a service, including some IoT projects. And the past 3 years and a half, I've been working in financial services. All my professional experience is in product management and product marketing. As an educational background, I'm an engineer in telecom engineering. Sorry to repeat the word twice, but I have, as you see, done a couple of extra masters, an executive master in management with Solvay Business School and a master in internet businesses in ISD. And I'm currently doing a master in data science and statistics. Something I wanted also to share is a bit on my personal side. I am very fond of traveling. I consider myself extremely lucky because I've been in more than 43 countries worldwide in my life. I have even lived in 4 different countries, which is something that has allowed me to develop my skill languages. So I'm fluent in, obviously, Spanish. This is my mother tongue, English and French, and a little bit of Portuguese and Dutch. As I put in my previous slide, I have volunteered for several NGOs, and in one of them, a Street Child, I had the opportunity to run, to raise funds to support the Street Child as an NGO. This is something, is also one of my passions, sports and nature. So this is something about me as well. And the last thing is that outside of the professional, strictly professional world, I channel my creativity and I write short stories, some for kids, and I publish in Amazon. As Miriam was saying, the session is recorded. All of you are by default on mute to facilitate the master class, but I really encourage you to write questions on the chat or the question box. In theory, it should appear on the bottom right of your screens at any time. I don't see it, but Miriam can help me and can potentially check and stop me, no issue, you interrupt. And if there's something not clear or any problem, please let me know. And I would like really to have a very interactive session. So there will be some polls, quizzes and questions. So please don't hesitate to join. It would be a lot of richer the session today with you. So let's start with a poll. Miriam is going to launch it. You're going to see it on a screen. Many of you have product management or project experience. And here the idea is, in your experience, how many projects or products have been deployed successfully. And the definition of success I have is a very traditional one. So with the right scope, on time and on budget. So please don't hesitate to answer here what you have as a perception in your experience. Miriam, just let me know how it goes, just to move on.
Yes, we have some 80%.
Okay, excellent.
Answering that 50 to 75% and 20% saying 25 to 50. So we have, yeah, from the middle part, let's say, okay. Not so much from the either bottom or lower half or the upper half, but yeah. So I think
maybe
now
I don't know if you can share it on screen, yeah. So everybody can see it. Maybe it's easier.
Now,
if you the poll, I think it's so. Okay, I have excellent. Well, this is an extremely positive result, very honestly, and I'll explain you in a bit why. I confess I didn't expect so much in the positive. So if you can close the poll, please, Miriam, and I'll return to the slides. Okay, so I hope you see my screen again. If not, just give a shout. So the Standish Group is a company that performs for many years now an annual report on software development, so any size of projects in any country in the world. This report is called the chaos report. You see what the acronym stands for there, and you have a link at the bottom of the page if you're interested. And in essence, they were measuring the success of software projects along the years. So they define successful, what I said before, projects that are right on time, budget, and scope. Challenge is if one of these three variables fails for some reason, and fail is projects that are really stopped. You see the percentages, and this is a very large and extensive research they publish annually. And in fact, I would say, I mean, it's not necessarily fully bad, but it's quite different for what you answered. And in general, the 30% of the projects, which I consider personally a relatively modest number, are really successful, and the rest are either challenged or even fail. You may consider that these figures are 2015. The reason why I chose that year is because these are published for free. This is a company that invoices and charges for these reports. So the reports from more recent years are not free of charge. But for what you see in the press releases they publish when they announce the new release, the percentages are more or less similar. I would like also to share some thought, because when we think about today in the economy, how many projects and products are related to software, if we think about this figure, it's kind of astonishing somehow, because it means that in terms of how we use resources, and here I refer to our time and the money that the individuals and the employees cost, these I think are numbers that could be improved. And in fact, a lot of areas of project management and theories have been developed precisely for this reason. In your experience, maybe you're not going to find the same approach because you have a very positive numbers in the answers that you provided before. If you can put in the chat, what are the reasons why you believe, in your experience again, that projects would be challenged in the sense that they would be delayed, they would be more expensive, or maybe there is a problem in the scope. Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share with us? And Miriam, as I don't see the chat, if there's someone writing, please, yes, read it aloud, please. It would be nice.
Yes, at the moment, I think it has been a big piece to chew
No,
on.
it's okay.
They're still thinking about it, I guess.
Okay, no issue. It doesn't matter. It's to make it interactive. In general, and I'm moving on, mindful also a bit of the time for the session, the majority of the reasons you find in these reports, and when you talk to people with a lot of experience in software project management or product management, the majority of the reasons you find where the projects are not successful, according to this definition, fall into one of these categories, either volatility, uncertainty, complexity, or ambiguity. So I'm going to give you some examples. These are very generalistic. Obviously, they applied as well to Internet of Things specific projects, but I think it could be useful, and maybe you can relate to them in your own experience. So in terms of uncertainty, for instance, will our competitor launch faster than us? It could happen, and it really disrupts somehow, or it creates an annoyance in our plans, in our business plans. Or we have uncertainty if we are going to be able to secure the budget and resources if it's a large company and we are competing, for instance, with other projects. In terms of volatility, we can have, for instance, we start with a decision on technology, for instance, a specific project, and somehow there is a disruption in technology along the development of this project or the launch of a new product. Or, for instance, there could be some political crisis, depending on what country in the world you're living in. Obviously, it's not the same situation depending on the geography. In terms of complexity, you can have things that are very typical, like the decision-making process in very large corporations. It could be sometimes administrative and slow. So it's complex in this regard, but there are also external complexities. For instance, when you are working in an international environment, an Internet of Things, for instance, you have to supply devices to providers. Imagine it's a consumer Internet of Things. Supply chain in international environments could be a very complex area to manage, and there could be problems in that area. And in terms of ambiguity, you can have also examples of, for instance, the most important and classical one in general is that the customer needs are not properly understood or clear, or they are even changing over time. That could be also a sense of ambiguity, or things that are not really related to our core business. So these are just examples of things that could be creating these disruptions or these challenges that software projects are facing. And this is precisely why we are here today. I mean, the title of the webinar is how to navigate uncertainty and in IoT projects, specific software part. And somehow what I would like to highlight, and the whole presentation today is going to share a framework and a framework to allow to work on the mindset to approach complex projects, precisely because it's my personal belief that in many cases, all these things I was talking about that can disrupt any project, they are not necessarily in our hands to control, not even for very large companies sometimes with a lot of resources. So what is very powerful to control is how we approach the problem, so working on our mindset. And somehow I encourage, and I hope I will help or inspire you to think that we can live comfortable in the discomfort zone somehow when we are facing this challenge, instead of feeling a bit helpless or in a too strong challenge or struggle. Before starting in the framework, I'm going to share precisely as a tool to navigate uncertainty. I would like to align some definitions because as for what we've seen in the subscription, not all your profiles are the same. So it's just to be sure that the words I'm using along the presentation are the same definitions for you guys as for me. The first one is framework. We are working today in sharing a framework especially, and a framework is a tool that help us to look at reality, which is different from a model, which is a way to represent reality. It's a subtlety, but it's important. One focus more on how we can react, and the other is already a decided representation of reality. Another word I'm going to use is a methodology. Methodology, in a very academic way, is a set of principles, tools, and practices, as I'm reading the sentence, that help us to achieve a certain objective. Some may argue that methodologies are somehow theoretical, and some maybe even challenge the concept to consider them as not very practical in real life, in a real business. It is my strong belief that methodologies are a synthesis of the learning and experience of a lot of people that have faced the similar challenges in any kind of project. Especially here, we're talking about software projects. Does it mean they are universal and bulletproof and no exception or no adaptation is needed? No, and we'll talk about this precisely along the presentation. However, I think they are a very powerful tool with the right framework and the right methodology that can help us to properly approach a specific challenge or uncertainty in a project of Internet of Things, of software project. And the other two definitions, which are a bit specific, and I would like also to highlight here, is the definition of project management and product management. This is a bit oversimplified. Again, is to try to ease the presentation. In general, when I'm referring to project management, I'm referring to a one-time thing. So it's something that you're typically doing to, for instance, create a product or update the product. And traditionally, again, I'm oversimplifying, the metrics are internal to the company. So we're talking about how efficiently we use the budget, the time, and obviously the scope in general is defined by some internal people in the company. Product management is about the life cycle. So it's by definition not a one-off activity, which means that it can include a lot of project management. Maybe one for launch, several could be for updates along the life cycle to improve it. And even we can have project management to end a product that is at the end of life. The optics here are slightly different. It's a kind of different angle, which product management is going to take care about a lot. It's about creating value for the customer and satisfaction for the customer. Does this mean they don't talk to each other, or they are not, one is ignoring the other? Obviously not. But again, I wanted to do this subtlety because in some methodologies with the framework we are going to use, we're trying precisely to create this bridge. So here is the kind of core item of the presentation today about precisely navigating uncertainty in software projects, specifically in IoT. I would like to share today with you the Cynefin framework. Cynefin is a model developed by Dave Snowden. You have it at the bottom of the slide, and a URL where you could have much more resources if you were interested to go deeper in the topic. Cynefin is a Welsh word. I don't speak Welsh. This is something explained by the founder, and it means, it's a very nice meaning. It means place of multiple belongings. And as I said, it's a framework that allows to face somehow uncertainty. So let's go for it. Dave Snowden, what it does somehow is to simplify the approaches to problem, and he defines that there are two major aspects. So you have either on the right of the slide the realm of predictability, or on the other side something that are unpredictable. And this way it already creates somehow a simplification of problems, either you're on one side or the other. Let's say when you start something new, and I'm talking about anything new, obviously here we focus also on IoT projects, somehow we feel that there is a disorder. There's everything to understand, everything to be approached, created, etc. And the thing in disorder for me is that you can have, and this is something also defined in the framework, is that if you're not conscious, and this is why I'm talking about mindset, if you're not conscious that you are in the disorder, you are confused, and you cannot be very efficient in taking any action when you are confused. You're maybe even in panic mode. However, if we have a mindset of being conscious that we can approach this disorder, that gives us a lot of power, because we are kind of able to act on the things we see. The first realm that the framework models is the clear environment. Clear is the realm of known knowns. So it's something completely predictable, very straightforward. So if we talked about anything, you and I, we are going to agree extremely easily about the causality and consequence of the things. So it's very, very straightforward. Then we are going to have the complicated area. It's still predictable, but there is some variability on the outcome. It's not like ABC, ABC, ABC. So this is the realm of experts in general, and it would be the realm of known unknowns somehow. So here the experts are going to have a different value than in the clear scenario, okay? Then again, in a very high level first approach to the framework, we have the complex problems. Complex problems are going to be the unknown knowns. And in here, it's different from the complicated, because we're in the unpredictable. So experts are not useful. Well, I'm going to rephrase. It's not really that they are not useful, it's that the role changes. An expert providing a recommendation in a complicated problem, it ensures somehow the course to action to have a predictable success or a predictable outcome in the project. However, the role of an expert in a complex area is about creating hypotheses, but we don't know what's going to be the outcome. So the approach to problems is going to be significantly different. And last, it would be the realm of unknown unknowns, and this is what the framework names as chaotic. And in here, obviously, nothing, no one knows. It's really about experimentation, totally. Last thing that the model highlights, and I think is very, very interesting, is what the framework, I said model and I wanted to say framework, calls the complacency cliff. And it means that in some cases, if you are in a company or in a project and you think everything is completely clear, and somehow you're not doing a conscious effort of being attentive to certain changes that could happen externally or even internally in a company, they call it significant complacency cliff, because you can have a major disruption and then you fall into chaotic and you don't know how to handle this, okay? So with this first introduction, I would like to invite you to use Kahoot. Okay, Kahoot is an interactive survey. It's kind of a mini game. So for this, I invite you to connect with your mobile phones to the URL kahoot.it. And in the meantime, I'm going to launch it. I think you see still my screen. I'm going to launch the game. Okay. So when you connect to the URL, you are going to see, well, you have to introduce a PIN number, which is what you have here. Sorry, I'm just checking. I hope it's working for you. I'm doing it at the same time as you, just to be sure it works. And then when you introduce the PIN number, you are going to introduce also an alias or a name. You can put whatever you prefer. Okay. Okay, I'm putting myself here. I'm not going to play, but at least it was just to check that everything was also working well. We'll wait a little bit more because I see some of you are joining. Don't be shy. I think it's kind of funny. I hope it will be useful also to sink in concepts here. Miriam, if you want, I start, even if there are more assistants than people in the game, or we wait still? What do you think?
I think we can start. Can they still join even if the game is in?
No, they cannot. So it's okay. Okay, we have one extra.
So just last 5 seconds to
yeah,
take part of the tournament.
Excellent. Well, okay, let's start. It's okay. So you are going to have 10 questions about challenges. Some are generic, some of specific of IoT. And the idea is to class if they belong to clear, complicated, complex, or chaotic. So what do you think about COVID? You have in your mobile phone, in theory, colors to answer. So you have answered. And as you see on the left, you have a timer. So it's time bound, otherwise you're out. Oh, well, I would consider COVID-19 as chaotic because it has disrupted from day to night a lot of business, even complete business. You can see touristic situation. I mean, airplanes, hotels, restaurants, bars. But the idea is that it's very difficult to manage here. Okay. So next question then. Well, by the way, yeah, you're going to see the score. This kind of this gamification around. Okay. The second question. Imagine you have to change a tire. This is a problem. Of what type would you say this? Excellent. And it is a very straightforward kind of problem. Let's see how it goes. The podium. Oof. I was answering. I'm going to delay my answers. It looks like intriguing. Okay. Next question. A health diagnosis. So you go to a doctor, you have some symptoms, and the doctor needs to know what is your problem. Excellent. I would say it's complicated rather than complex, but we'll go into some details in a bit with more examples. So we have still, I think, one example I on purpose didn't answer. Okay. We have still one question with our generic, climate change. Complex. Okay, excellent. The next following, and we have 6 examples, are going to be related to Internet of Things exclusively, okay? The battery failure of a device, for instance, in an industrial Internet of Things installation. What kind of problem would it be? Clear. I agree with that. Thanks for that. Let's see the podium. We have changed an LK here. Fantastic. Okay, let's go next. A cybersecurity breach in your applications that controls what's happening with your devices or with your software. Yeah, excellent, excellent. But you see, it's not so straightforward sometimes. This is why it's very important, especially when we are in teams, to agree with this among the team members precisely to select the approach. Imagine there is a problem of IP addresses and there is a shortage. What kind of problem would this be? Because you have too many devices to address. You don't have addresses to manage that. Okay. Well, I wouldn't say it's extremely clear, but again, it's interesting to see the different opinions. Okay, so let's go for another example. And we have still 3 to go. Internationalization of a product of Internet of Things. Where you have different competitions, different taxes, different languages, currencies, supply chain for the devices, the hardware part. Very, very different answers. Okay, I would say it's a complex problem. 2 to go. Lack of demand. So you have launched a product and apparently no one seems to pick it up. I would define this as a chaotic because you have invested a lot of resources to launch a product, and if it's not working, it's kind of a big issue. Okay, I still have LK, no many changes. So last one, you are a product manager and you need to do prioritization of different functionalities to launch. Complicated, I would say. Anyway, I hope you like the idea. I guess it has to sink in a bit. We have the podium here with the 3 best ones answering the questions. Okay, Gothar, sorry if I pronounce wrong the names. And the first one, I think it was okay. Ta-da! Okay, so excellent. Thanks for participating. I'm just closing this. I'm going back to the previous slide. Just a second. Okay, I hope you see again the PowerPoint. Okay, so if we have seen the model, we have done a mini game to see if we can agree on how we class or approach the problems, which is very interesting because it's a very heterogeneous way of saying it. And I know it's the first time you're seeing also the framework. But the big question I would like to ask you is, do you think the problems stay in the same domain like forever? So once you have correctly said this is the right area, it's like going to stay. I don't know, Miriam, if someone is on fire and writing some thoughts on the chat, but feel free. It would be nice to hear your thoughts. Well, the thing is that I would like to show you with this slide that for me the answer is no. I can take a very oversimplified example. When you think about the early days of humanity, like thousands of years ago, making fire probably was in the chaotic realm or disorder realm. People were scared, they didn't know how to manage it. Probably was coming from lightning in some tree or something, and you didn't know how to keep it or things like that. Whereas today is something that we consider pretty simple. We have matches or other devices to produce fire. So we would consider that it has evolved. And if we think about it, most of the knowledge evolves in this sense. So in the beginning, we are in disorder. Probably we'll go to chaotic, to complex, to complicated, and clear, as much as we understand the different things. So I would like to say that, we mentioned before the complacency cliff to approach problems. So this is when you think you're in the clear, but in fact, you're not really paying attention to things that are changing, and you can fall into the chaotic. Most of the companies are in the complicated realm, in the software services or Internet of Things services. And one of the main things that most of the companies want is to move things to the clear domain. This is called standardization. And this is important because it helps from a business perspective to create a lot of productivity. You're, for instance, optimizing your cost or your speed of manufacturing or your speed of delivery to customers, etc., etc. When you talked about moving from complex to complicated, in fact, you are thinking about things, you are making hypotheses that could work, and you are testing and learning. And the idea is that somehow you're going to learn from that. When you fail, nothing happens, but when something is already extrapolated and is working, it could move to the complicated realm. And from the chaotic to the complex and there to the complicated will be the radical innovation area, or radical repurposing. You can call it digital transformation or heavy transformation. In this regard, I would like to highlight that most of us, we are human and we have a strong need or preference for safety and predictability. And this is very important in terms of mindset, because when we talk precisely about radical transformation or true innovation, somehow we need to acknowledge mentally that we need some room for error. And this is the kind of thing that most of the companies or even entrepreneurs is very hard, because you have to acknowledge that failure is possible. It's not the same having the same level of error in the clear domain, which it should be simplifying close to zero, that in the complex domain that maybe you have to do a lot of trial and error to figure out your way through. And this is important because sometimes what happens is that because we are educated and we tend to think about risk management, we see the negative side. So what if it fails? And what I would like to share with you is what if it works? Because that's also the other side of the same coin. So potentially it is also about thinking about opportunities. So in the complex arena, we can imagine or we can develop how to work with some heuristics to precisely navigate this uncertainty. That's the title of the class, and how to think about it. So the question to the mapping over time, it can change. And I forgot to say, yes, sorry, in the chaotic, if we don't manage this through proper innovation and proper planning in companies, we can fall into disorder. Something happens, a major disruption, competitors, etc. And in there you go to either failure as a company or either disaster recovery. And here we can think about what's happened to many businesses with COVID, but we can think about unfortunately sad examples of companies like they didn't anticipate major trends like Nokia, Blockbuster, or Kodak that unfortunately just disappeared. Another question I would like to share with you is when we think about methodologies, this is a framework what we're talking about, but methodology could be some big name of project management in Agile or Waterfall, some certifications that are very well renowned. So do all these methodologies suit for every domain in this framework? So for me, the answer is no. I have 3 slides and I hope this will help me explaining you why and why this is also useful in navigating uncertainty, because the consciousness is a very important thing, but selecting the right tool for managing that or that methodology in the right arena, it will be also a very important thing to maximize the success of your Internet of Things projects. So in a very simplistic way, the framework the clear domain, it provides very rigid constraints. This is what I was saying, ABC, ABC. So somehow the person in charge of the problem senses what the problem is, takes a categorization, and then knows the answer and applies the answer. So imagine this is a health issue, something that most of us somehow we have experience with. This you go to with your analysis that have been prescribed by your doctor. You go to the analytics center, they see what kind of analysis, and they decide to take 1 tube of blood, 2 tubes of blood, or put 2 different labels, etc. It's very standardized, okay? So the variability is almost 0. In the case of complicated scenario, it's a bit different. We need to sense, analyze, not categorize, and respond. This is what I was talking about, the realm of experts here. So you have governing constraints because there is some variability in here. So going back again to the health example, imagine a patient goes with very typical symptoms of COVID-19 that the doctor needs to analyze if you have blood pressure high, if you're pregnant, if you have some allergy to some medicine or things like that, to know if they can prescribe a certain treatment or it would be not good to prescribe that treatment for the patient. In the complex, we are talking about heuristics. In fact, we don't know. This is what we said before. We have to test, and depending on the result, we need to see what happens. Depending on your nationality, I don't know where you are from, because this, I'm going to make a reference of a TV series from the United States called Dr. House. This would be the typical episode of Dr. House. You reach a patient with a very strange combination of symptoms, a lot of adverse reactions to combinations of medicines that have been given to the person, and then obviously there's some lupus in there or something. So the team of doctors, they really haven't reached out the diagnosis. So they are just doing hypotheses and say, well, let's think that this is what could explain this, and these symptoms. Let's try this medicine. And then they see the reaction to the medicine. And depending on that, they change course. Sometimes it's in the good direction, sometimes they need to correct. And last one, it would be the chaotic, which in this situation is completely different approach. You really need to act because you are in an emergency situation that you don't know necessarily how it's going to unfold. And here, for instance, the COVID outbreak, you could have an Ebola outbreak that happened or other kind of situations. You need to just provide a first answer because you see the situation is out of control. Then we'll see how it unfolds, as I was saying. And then you respond, but you need to figure out things on the go completely. So if we go deeper, still on a high level approach, in the clear domain, we are going to have a best practice. So these were in the IoT projects examples. We saw one of the battery, for instance, the device, the IoT device runs out of batteries, kind of a best practice to change it. Or there is a network connection that's failing, Wi-Fi or 5G or something like that. So there can be kind of a very clear process that is very well specified and is very predictable to solve those kind of challenges. In the complicated domain, this is what we're saying is the good practices. We can have issues like a standardization of protocols of IoT. There is a lot of different protocols out there, but you still have experts that can, with a lot of thoughts, recommend we can go for this one or this one for reason A, B, C, okay? In the complex world, this is a fancy word, exactive. In essence, it means emergent practice or new practice or even adaptive practice. The idea is that you really try things. This is where the agile paradigm thrives. We'll talk about this a bit later. And in software development, this would be about prioritization of product, precisely to ensure that we deliver value the fastest you can, to ensure you validate the value you're delivering and don't engage too much resources in the wrong direction. And in the chaotic, you have novel practices you really don't know. This could be, for instance, a lack of demand, as I was saying, or a disruption in technology or something like that. That's completely putting potentially out of business your project. Okay, so some of you in the registration, you mentioned that you are experts in project management. Some of you are certified. So as the question was, do all the methodologies respond to all the areas? No. So in clear domain, we can use very clearly waterfall or lean. Waterfall is kind of a sequential approach to problems, which when it's very predictable, it works pretty fine. It's fantastic. It's not a taboo to use waterfall, okay? Lean was invented by Henry Ford, but was very popularized by Toyota. And in essence, it's a methodology that aims to optimize or reduce at maximum waste in the production chains in automobile, okay? So it's very optimized to productivity, okay? So this could be two typical methodologies that are very valid to apply when the problem is clear. When you are in the complicated realm, as I was talking about, we have other methodologies. So here are two examples. You have Six Sigma. Six Sigma has slightly a bias for optimizing value created to the customer, okay? And is based a lot on expertise, where Kanban, that was also highly developed by Toyota in automobile, has slightly a bias for process. And what it aims to do is to change the process where needed and then go back to lean. So it's a kind of process learning I was telling before. When you really master something, you can move it from more predictable outcomes, okay? In the complex is where Agile really thrives. Agile precisely is about testing, and it's kind of this mantra from the United States: startups fail fast, learn fast. So that's what somehow, in a very simplistic way of presenting this, you have these methodologies. Probably the most popular is Scrum, and it's precisely about doing iterations. So you test, you develop something that creates value, you test if that value is there, and depending on the outcome, you're going to continue building on that, or then you are just discarding it. And there is really no labeled or famous practice in the chaotic, because it has to be invented based on the situation. As you said, I passed a bit briefly, but I would like to make us zoom in the Agile versus Waterfall, because in software development, this can be of a fight, is one or the other. I hope I convince you a bit that it depends really on the context. Waterfall can be helpful in some cases. But what Agile has been very successful in software development is because precisely this change of mindset. And I would really like to focus on that change of mindset. Traditionally, software projects, well, I guess many other projects, not necessarily software, but they had a fixed variable, which was the scope or somehow the value to deliver to the customer. And what was variable was time and budget. So somehow someone in the company said, well, here's the list of requirements, and I estimate this is going to take this time and this budget. But in general, as we saw based on the chaos report from the Standish group, this is unlikely to be successful all the time. What happens is that when you have especially very large endeavors in software development that take even years, you have mobilized a lot of people, a lot of time. And when you reach to the market, a lot of things may have changed. Customer needs, competitive landscape, technology, etc. Which means that you have invested a lot of money and resources for something that doesn't create value. And you may think that's innocuous, but this could be a lot of money. I'm going to give you a very simple example. Probably all of you are using Word from Microsoft, or you have used Microsoft Word in some time in your life. I don't know if you know, but one of the features of Microsoft Word is to develop macros in BASIC, which is a programming language, and you can do complex macros. I doubt that, 1% of people use that feature of Microsoft Word. However, a lot of engineers were put there to develop that feature of Microsoft Word. I don't know how much it costs, but it's not really what triggers that you purchase or use Microsoft Word. So if we go to Agile, which is kind of the difference I wanted to make, what Agile does is to box and to fix the time and the budget. So this could be 3 people that work in periods of 2 or 3 weeks. And what you have to sacrifice is a scope of value, which means that you have a very thought through process where you are really deciding, like Dr. House in the example of health, to say, I need to try this to see if I get value. And if you have value, fantastic, you build up. If you don't, you just discard this and you explore something else. So Agile is not necessarily faster than Waterfall. However, in the full scope, if the scopes were equal, what it really is about changing what you do or how you approach to the problem. Because in one case, in waterfall, you may spend too much money and time on something that is not necessarily successful. And this is what Agile pretends to solve, is force the process to iterate and learn on the go without these major investments. And again, I take this example of the Standish Group. It's the same report, 2015 again. But here they put the same successful challenge and fail, the same definition, more or less, as I said before. You have also the size of the projects and then the methodology used, Agile or Waterfall. And most of the metrics, I think there's one exception here, the majority of the metrics are really much better, significantly better, especially when they are very large projects in Agile methodology, because it's a better way to adapt in this complex arena where you have this uncertainty of projects. That's the goal of the thing. Last, I would like to talk about, just as a subtlety, in a very traditional way of things, I explained the difference between project management and product management. But if you see what Agile tries to do is bridge the gap between the two, because they need to be very linked. So it's not a person just seeing if this the project is advancing on time and budget, but is also providing the real value needed to decide, should we move forward with this idea, this project of IoT, or should we stop or discard or do something else? And somehow this is, if you are some of you are software engineers or project managers, this kind of the waterfall stages, and this is kind of, obviously it's a joke of what happens sometimes in the different phases of waterfall. The customer says what they want, it's not necessarily understood by the analyst. The design is kind of this broken communication step by step that is cascading down. So that's the big challenge in waterfall in very large projects. And what Agile tries to do is to discover very fast the last picture of this slide, which is what the customer really needs with the minimum set of resources.